Crystal is a pleasant young woman, almost 35, which is about the same age as my oldest daughter. I've met her several times at events at the school where my wife teaches. I know my wife talks to Crystal often, and I've unfortunately become involved in the troubles of her divorce. From what I've heard, her ex-husband was really difficult, a total jerk who wanted to date other people while away. When he got caught, he didn't admit it. Instead, he blamed Crystal for not being exciting enough, not loving enough, and focusing too much on her own issues rather than his. I'm sharing this because it's the Friday night before the opening day of deer season, and instead of heading to our cabin with my wife, I'm on my way to pick up Crystal. Nearly 12 years ago, we bought 200 acres of Missouri woods at a great price. Since then, we've spent a lot of time building a weekend cabin, making trails, and setting up food plots for deer. Normally, I would be going on this trip with my wife, but this year is different. A few weeks ago, over dinner, she announced she'd be missing the first weekend because she had meetings in the state capitol, which we jokingly call the Big House. Although being chosen for this was an honor, I found it inconvenient. I would have preferred to go hunting alone, something I've done many times. However, after a recent health issue, my wife didn't want me in the woods by myself all weekend. So, she arranged for me to take Crystal with me to give her her first deer hunt. I heard she knew how to shoot, but had never been hunting before. Oh, and I should mention that not only is it the first day of deer season, but it's also my birthday, which my wife will miss. I pulled into Crystal's driveway and honked my horn, which isn't my usual way of doing things, but that's what I was told to do. Moments later, she opened the door, and the light framed her as she came out carrying a lot of gear. Resigned to my role as her guide, I got out to help her with her things. She was incredibly talkative, chatting nonstop during the hour-long drive to the cabin, full of energy and excitement. This was a nice change from the quiet, withdrawn person my wife had described lately. I much preferred her lively attitude, especially since we'd be in a small hunting blind together for hours. We reached the cabin around 9 p.m. and I got to work turning on the power, water, and heat. Even though it might only drop to 50 tonight, it's nice to wake up warm instead of feeling like I'm camping in a tent. By 9:30, I had a fire going in the stove, and warm air was filling the room. I had already shown Crystal the loft where she would sleep, and she was up there getting her gear ready. Meanwhile, I turned on the satellite and settled in to watch the end of an old war movie. From upstairs, she called down and asked if she could use the shower. I told her to help herself, having already pointed out where the bathroom was. I had designed the cabin to be simple and efficient, relying on a wood stove for heat since we were off the grid, using only solar power and a backup generator. The bathroom featured 2 large sliding doors that met in a corner, one leading to the bedroom and the other to the great room where I was sitting. When the doors were open, warm air circulated between the rooms, and when closed, they provided privacy. I thought it was a clever setup. I couldn't help but mumble to myself as Crystal came down the spiral staircase beside the sofa. She was wrapped in a towel that barely covered her. She carefully made her way down and walked towards the bathroom, the towel barely keeping things covered as she turned to slide the door to the great room shut, nearly dropping her soap and shampoo in the process. It felt wrong for anyone to suggest she wasn't stunning. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind and focus on the movie. The sound of the water starting in the shower made me picture her naked just beyond the door. It crossed my mind to just step over there, and then I scolded myself again. I was supposed to be teaching her about hunting, not thinking about her like that. I could hear her softly singing in the shower, but after a few minutes, the singing stopped, and all that remained was the sound of running water. I figured she wouldn't run out of hot water with our instant heater, but I was surprised by how long she was taking. And I was glad she chose to shower tonight instead of in the morning. Then I heard her moan over the sound of the water, and it painted a vivid picture in my mind that I didn't want to think about. I wondered if she realized how well her sounds carried through the walls. Finally, the water turned off, and I heard her humming again, likely drying off. Lost in my thoughts about what she looked like in there, I admitted to myself that I was feeling a bit wild. A lot of it had to do with my still active libido and my wife's lack of interest. It wasn't her fault. Really, her condition made it tough for her to be interested, which turned into a problem for both of us. We loved each other, but our differences had led to arguments, and we were still figuring out how to manage things. Once every month or so was tough, and bedtime felt more like sleep than intimacy. Crystal peeked around the door, holding the towel in front of her as she walked toward the stairs. Part of the towel covered her chest, another part was drying her hair, and the rest was draped over her legs, leaving her sides and back exposed. As she climbed the stairs, I tried not to look but failed. I was almost relieved when she stepped out of view. She smiled and said she really appreciated my wife inviting her out, adding that she thought she would have a fantastic time. As she walked down the stairs again, this time wearing navy blue shorts and a short white shirt that didn't quite cover her completely, she stepped off and sat down on the sofa next to me, holding what looked like an empty peanut butter jar. "Should be a fun day tomorrow," I said, feeling a bit awkward. "You're not shy, are you?" "I can go elsewhere if you are," she replied sweetly. "No, I'm not shy," I answered, unsure about what she meant. "Good," she said, opening the jar and setting the lid aside. Then, quite casually, she lifted her shirt, fully exposing her breast. I sat there, unsure of what to do as she started to express milk into the jar. "Lindsay told me you supported her breastfeeding our kids," she said. "My husband thought it was gross," I replied, still watching. "Back then it was more accepted, but now it feels harder to breastfeed. The only way I can do it while working is by expressing milk," she explained. "Lindsay said you helped her with that too." "Yeah, a few times," I admitted. "I bet she appreciated it," she said softly, leaning forward to squeeze more into the jar. "I think she did," I said, not hiding my gaze. "I wish someone would do that for me." "My husband wouldn't do anything like that," she continued. As she moved the jar between her legs and took off her top, she asked, "Would you do this for me just once? I want to see how it feels." I was shocked. "You want me to express some milk?" "I really don't think." "Oh, I'm sure Lindsay wouldn't mind," she insisted. "It's just milk." I hesitated, thinking my wife would not be okay with me touching another woman. "It'll be fine," she said, leaning closer, making it hard for me to resist. "Just reach over and do the other side," she encouraged softly. I started to protest again, saying it wasn't right. "It's fine. Just squeeze a little milk," she pressed. I mumbled back, still shocked by her suggestion. She took my hand and guided it to her breast, and without fully thinking about it, I squeezed, spraying milk into the jar and onto my legs. "Oh, that feels different," she said softly. As I continued, hoping this wouldn't reach Lindsay, she said, "You have such gentle hands." "It feels amazing." I agreed. I'm sure Lindsay wouldn't mind at all, but if you want, I won't say anything. "Good, because she'd be mad," I replied, continuing to help her express more milk. When she thought we had enough, she gently pulled my hand away, letting it rest on her stomach. She capped the jar and placed it beside me before turning to face me, her breasts pressing against me. She reached for my hand again, pulling it down and pressing my palm against her stomach. "You know, when you do that, it kind of turns me on," she said, letting go of my hand and sliding hers lower. I heard the soft snap of her shorts unsnapping and the slow pull of the zipper. My heart raced. "Crystal," I started, but she touched her finger to my lips and said, "Shh, don't say anything. I just want to enjoy being close to you. It's been a long time since I felt this way." She moved her hand from my lips and lowered it back to her shorts, pushing them down her hips. As she lifted herself to get the shorts over her firm backside, she kept going until they fell to the floor, leaving her naked on my lap. I quietly protested. I didn't mean to, but her fingers on my lips stopped me again. "No need to explain. I just wanted to see if you thought I looked good enough." "This is really wrong," I said again. "You're my wife's friend. I shouldn't be doing this." "Trust me, she won't know. Right now, I just want to feel your hand lower," she replied softly, guiding my hand down. She lifted one leg and hooked her foot on the sofa, spreading her legs and guiding my hand to where she wanted it. "Crystal, oh please don't stop. I just want to feel someone else," she pleaded. "I love the way you touch me, gentle yet firm. Lindsay is so lucky." "Yeah, and I'm in trouble," I mumbled. She reached for the waistband of my sweatpants, pulling them down. They made love for a while. Afterward, I sat staring at the TV, barely noticing that the movie had ended. Eventually, I turned off the light and went to bed, putting on flannel pajamas before getting under the covers. Morning came with the alarms beeping, urging me to get up and turn it off. I climbed out of bed and headed to the bathroom. Once I was done, I returned to my bedroom and started to dress. It was only when I undressed that I remembered I wasn't alone, so I closed the doors to both rooms just in case she came down before I was ready. The morning was chilly, but it would warm up later, so I chose lightweight thermal underwear and my usual camouflage hunting clothes. Dressed and in my boots, I went to the kitchen and called up to the loft for Crystal to wake up. "Okay," she called back. I heard her footsteps on the stairs and turned to see her coming down, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She was completely naked, and her breasts, full of milk, looked even bigger than the night before, bouncing as she moved down the circular staircase. "I'll be there for breakfast in a minute," she yawned, heading to the bathroom and leaving the door open. I couldn't see much from the kitchen anyway, where I was frying bacon. When she came into the kitchen still naked, she grabbed the peanut butter jar from the fridge, sitting on a chair and leaning slightly as she started expressing milk into a container from her right breast. "You could put some clothes on," I said, frowning as I turned the bacon. "You don't like seeing me naked?" she asked, not looking up. "I didn't say that. So you do like it." I admitted I did, but added, "Why not wear clothes? You don't in the house after the girls are asleep." "This isn't home," she replied. "Well, if you don't want to be naked, I guess you could put something on, but there's no point now. Breakfast will be ready soon. You'll need a warm dress. If you go out like that, you'll freeze." "I have plenty of warm clothes," she said, switching to her other breast, which looked even larger now. I took the bacon off the heat and poured mixed eggs into another pan to scramble. By the time the eggs were done, so was she. It was almost a relief when she got up and walked naked to the stairs to get dressed. I took the ATV out of the shed and got it ready. "All set?" I asked when she came out of the cabin, her breath making little clouds in the crisp morning air. "I think so." "Gun, gear, ammo," she said, smiling, checking each one off. I climbed into the ATV with my gear already secured and held my hand out for her. She stepped onto the footrest and swung over the seat behind me, holding her gun and pack with one hand. I took her gun and put it in the second holder before I sat down, ready for the ride to the back of the property where I had picked a good spot for today. It overlooked a small pond and a large food plot, perfect no matter the weather. I built a sturdy blind on stilts that could fit 2 people, hoping to use it with my granddaughter when she was old enough to hunt. On this chilly ride, Crystal snuggled close to me for warmth as I drove down the dark trails at a steady 15 mph. After traveling about 100 yards from our destination, I stopped the ATV and turned off the engine. "We walk from here," I said, taking her out of the holder and showing her the way. "How far?" she asked. "Just about 100 yards. We don't want to scare the deer off the food plot." "Oh, do they not like the ATV?" she wondered. "It's not a natural predator, but the bigger bucks will catch its smell and steer clear," I explained while removing my pack. I switched on a red headlamp and turned off the ATV lights, leaving us in darkness for a moment until our eyes adjusted. We made our way down the path to the food plot, crossed it, and I helped her climb up into the stand that was 12 feet high. It wasn't fancy, just made of 2x4s with a wooden floor and metal sides and roof. On a chilly morning like this, it could get cold inside, but our warmth would soon take the edge off. The stand was designed with dark brown sides and a roof so the sun could warm it up during the cool fall days. As we settled in, I opened the windows and waited for the sun to rise. I sat with my eyes closed, not really asleep but not fully awake either, for about half an hour. Gradually, the eastern sky brightened. The colors shifted from black to deep purple, then dark blue with a hint of orange, and finally to light blue as the sun made its way up. The weather was perfect, and this spot was promising. All we needed was to see a deer. I hadn't even cocked my gun because this trip was mainly about teaching Crystal. "It's so pretty out here," she whispered. "Yep, all we need now is a deer," I replied quietly. "This is a good spot. I've gotten almost a dozen deer from this clearing. They come for the pond water." "Oh," she replied softly. We sat in silence for almost an hour before I noticed some movement in the morning stillness. There was no wind, so the leaves weren't rustling, and seeing a slight movement about 100 yards away through the brown leaves immediately caught my attention. I whispered to Crystal, pointing at the deer that was slowly moving toward the food plot. It was a small buck with thin, spiky 4-point antlers, not as developed as an older buck's. Young bucks often seem less cautious than their older counterparts. If they survive long enough, they learn to avoid risky situations, like wandering into an open food plot during hunting season. How do they know it's hunting season? I really can't say, but they always seem to. Crystal carefully raised her gun, pushing it out of the window of the blind and aiming down the plot toward the buck. As she settled in for the shot, she shifted her position a few times to get a clear view through her scope. "Wait for him to turn broadside," I advised. "Look, he's sniffing the air. He thinks he smells a doe." "Predictable," she whispered back, patiently waiting for the deer to move. "While a shot from the front can work, it's better not to waste good meat by shooting through its body." "Okay, here he goes. Get ready. When you have a good side shot, aim behind the shoulder and pull the trigger," I instructed. "Got it," she replied as the deer turned to its right, exposing its side as it walked toward the thicket by the pond. "Anytime," I whispered, hoping she wouldn't miss her chance. Then all I heard was a click. No bang, no recoil, just a loud click. Crystal cursed softly, pulling the gun back to chamber another bullet. By the time she got the gun out the window again, the deer had vanished behind the thicket, and her chance for a shot was gone. "So didn't you load your gun when we settled in?" I asked, trying to hold back my frustration. "I thought I did," she frowned. "Okay," I sighed, trying to stay patient. "Maybe he'll come back." "I hope so," she said as she pulled her gun back in and set it down again. "Oops," she added with a shy smile. I agreed, leaning back and sighing. Personally, I wouldn't have shot that deer, but for a beginner, any brown animal can seem like a good target. We sat quietly for about 10 minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Suddenly she stood up, doing her best in the low ceiling blind, and started taking off her coat. "You okay?" I asked. "I thought you said it would be cold." "It's getting really hot in here," she replied. "It's probably over 70 degrees now with the sun on us." "It's not that warm outside, I guarantee," I said, but I wasn't about to sit out there. She quietly dropped her jacket on the ground and sat back down, unlacing her boots. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Getting rid of these long johns." "I'm roasting," she said, pulling off one boot and quickly the other. She stood and bent down to avoid the roof, then unbuttoned her camo pants and slid them off. After sitting back down, she stood again and began pushing her green long underwear down her legs. I watched as she peeled the fabric away, revealing more of her skin until she sat naked next to me. There she giggled. "Naked co-ed hunting." Yeah," I replied, unable to look away. "So," she prompted. "So what?" I asked, confused. "Are you going to get undressed?" she clarified. "The deer can't see us in here, and nobody else will either." "What? Get naked?" I echoed, shocked. "It wouldn't be co-ed naked hunting if you weren't naked too," she teased with a grin. I hesitated, still processing her suggestion. "This is so inappropriate," I muttered. "Oh, it's no more inappropriate than you lying on my lap while I was squeezing milk," she shot back. "I'd say that was much worse than just being naked here with me and a deer." Like I said, I sighed. "Come on, you wouldn't want me to tell your wife that you were playing with my," she teased, a mischievous look in her eyes. "You wouldn't," I protested. "Besides, that was your idea. Do you really think she'd care whose idea it was? Who do you think she will trust more, you saying it was my idea or me saying you took my clothes off and played with me while I was asleep?" She smirked and responded, "You wouldn't." "I might, but maybe not." Then she added, "It wouldn't be too hard to get me to stay quiet." She looked at me with a little grin and asked, "So if I get naked with you, you won't tell her, right?" I tried to confirm, "Something like that." She kept grinning. I sighed, feeling deep in trouble already, so what did a little more matter? "That's the spirit," she cheered as I started taking off my boots. In just a few minutes I was completely undressed, and Crystal threw each piece of clothing out the window, leaving us both only in our boots. "There, now we're really naked," she giggled. "Looks like it," I replied dryly. She stood up as best as she could under the low ceiling and turned around, sitting on my lap with her back to me. She swung her leg over mine, leaned back, and guided my hands to her breasts. "I really need some milk," she said. "I'd rather you do it for me." "So all this getting naked was to get me to play with you?" I asked, surprised. More or less, she shrugged as we began to get close. I felt torn. I was cheating on my wife not just once but twice, and I was enjoying it. What did that say about me? I knew I should tell her, but how could I do that without hurting Crystal? My marriage was on the line and I felt guilty. "We should go inside," I said suddenly. "Okay, but our clothes are out there," Crystal pointed out, nodding at the open window. "You threw them out, so go get them," I chuckled weakly. "But it's cold. I'll freeze," she protested. "If that's the price it takes, then so be it," I replied seriously. After some time, Crystal finally got enough courage to grab our clothes. She threw them through the door and climbed back inside, shivering from the cold air that rushed in with her. It wasn't much warmer in the room, especially since she had left the door wide open. She sat back on my lap, seeking warmth, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. We stayed like that for a few minutes, my hands softly moving over her body. Then she broke the silence and whispered, "If you keep this up, you're going to have to love me again," she teased. I quickly pulled my hands back from her waist, saying I wasn't interested. She reached for my hands, guiding them back to her chest. I was enjoying it, but mentioned it was making me feel excited again. I joked that she might have to love me again when we got back. I cautiously replied that it might not be a good idea since we were already in trouble. She giggled and said, maybe not." Then she suggested we both take a shower, wondering if we could fit in the small shower stall together. I admitted Lindsay and I had done that before, then realized what I just said. She happily declared it was time to go, pulling me off the bench and leading me to the shower. I was left wondering how I got into this situation and what might come of it. We dressed to head back inside, skipping underwear since it seemed unnecessary. The ride back on the ATV was quiet as we each got lost in our thoughts. When we reached the cabin, the warmth from the wood stove was comforting while we brought our gear inside. Crystal started undressing again, looking eager for more, but instead of coming to me, she went up the stairs to the loft. "Come on, I have something for you up here," she called out as she climbed the spiral staircase. I replied, "Sure," and followed her, still in my boots and pants. She waited by the bed, her face lit up with a playful smile, hands behind her back. As I got closer, she handed me a small blue envelope, saying, "Here." I flipped it over and saw my wife's neat handwriting on the front, addressed to me. Inside was a birthday card that read, "To my sweet loving husband." As I opened it, I saw a printed message saying how special I am and that she would love me forever. Below that was her note, expressing concern about our friends divorcing later in life due to their sex lives. She didn't want that for us and appreciated me too much to risk losing me over sexual differences. She hoped we would eventually reconnect in that way, but for now she just wanted me to be happy. As a birthday gift, she said I could enjoy whatever I wanted with Crystal, as long as I saved my love for her. All she asked was that I answer one question at the end of the weekend: did I enjoy my present? She signed it with a loving happy birthday. I looked at her and asked if she had known this all along. She confirmed she had for weeks. Then we decided to take that shower together, realizing there were many ways to spend time in bed. I glanced at the card again, amazed, and joked about if Crystal came with cake too. She told me I would have to wait to find out. Stepping closer with her arms open, she pressed her soft body against me and kissed me deeply. After a long kiss, she asked, "Shower?" I agreed, wondering how I'd thank my wife for such an amazing birthday gift.